Thank you. Thank you very much. We have the sound here. All right. I think I need the other one. That's easy to do. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. Again, I am Sid, and I will be helping you to communicate with these experts. We've been talking since the morning about AI and talking about digital transformation. We heard from the government side. We spent maybe a couple of hours listening to His Excellency Honorable Prime Minister and the Minister of Telecom and Innovation, and we know a little bit about what Mauritius government wants in terms of technology and AI. Now let's hear from these experts, and I think the most important idea that we want to explore in this conversation is the role of government in creating an ecosystem that would be attractive enough to startups, to technology, and foreign direct investment, so Mauritius becomes the paradise of AI in the future. And let me, before I start doing that, actually share with you some numbers. When it comes to AI, there was a survey that just released a couple of months ago from the US. 91% from CEOs who have been asked the following question is, what is your take on artificial intelligence? 91% of the CEO think that it's a game changer, meaning it's going to radically change the way we do business. 84% said that they will, or AI will provide your company with more competitive advantage. 61% believe that there isn't enough of sense of urgency. And being here, actually, we are trying to create this sense of urgency that this technology is important and we needed to get on. And then finally, 88% of CEO asked this question, what do you think of AI? They believe it's actually a technical breakthrough. So we are in a very important historical moment. Let me start my first question to Hans. Hans leads the Dubai Technical Center in the UAE, and the DTEC, which is part of the Silicon Oasis Authority, has been instrumental in bringing foreign direct investment to Dubai, to the UAE, and in helping startups launch all this technology. So my question to you, Hans, is how did you do it? What are the fundamentals of government engagement in technology so you can create that sense of ecosystem that will be attractive enough to me, to you, to experts, and to the people in the audience to be in that environment?
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Sid. So if I can just paraphrase that slightly, I would say, how do you create an AI ecosystem? You know, when we started a few years ago, we weren't really thinking about AI. And to be quite honest, it's still quite a nascent market, a nascent ecosystem. But what we have done is we started off with an incubator, realized that that wasn't really a huge impact, it wasn't really giving a huge impact. You have a small cohort of a couple of startups, maybe you grow to 15 startups, but it didn't really give us this huge feeling of that we are having an impact. So we started to add to that. So we have a VC, now we have something we call event and learning, where we do about 100 events per year. We added a smart city accelerator, which focuses on smart city, but which also has a component on AI, and a couple of other pillars. And in doing that, we have actually managed to create an ecosystem which is flourishing on its own. So you don't need to push and push and push all the time. It's actually, they're doing business with themselves. We think we have reached a critical amount of startups there. We have set up more than 1,000 startups. We are adding another 1,000 startups over the next 24 months. And I'm happy to share in more detail when I hold my speech later on AI, on how we have created this ecosystem. But basically, simply just adding all these different ingredients to the ecosystem has created the ecosystem. That's I guess that there's no rocket science.
Very good. It actually has an element of magic to it, but also has an element of a clear policy about what you want to do. And I think in your case, you start with the idea of building the infrastructure. You need to have an instructor, you need to have a hub, you need to have a place where people can come and actually talk to each other, network, and build things. Let me move actually to Dr. Satyam. You spoke eloquently today about technology and how we should demystify it. What about the government? What's your take on the government role in helping technology?
I think government has a much bigger role because, of course, the one component that we talk about improving products and services to the citizens, but at the same time there is a corporate governance or data governance, and the impact of it is to be regulated eventually, right? There's a big discussion on it, and that requires a different kind of thinking as well, because Sophia was an example, but there is a lot more robotic technology coming in healthcare. How does it do? So FDA is involved in some of those analysis. Transportation, like if the robots are going to give out the tickets, like there has been so many cases in US that at one point one county has to waive off all those tickets because what the governance is there. So I think government has that role to play to watch. But on the other hand, in converting the talent, I think that's my passion, and so I keep talking about it. This requires mixing we talked about STEM, and think I was surprised that nobody put an EA in it, because if you look at Sophia, and I think somebody commented that, oh my God, the expressions were not very clear, but that requires the art part of it. So you have the STEM part, but then you put art in it. That's why it's called STEAM now. So the courses that have to be designed, the training that has to be provided is a combination of not only science, technology, and the government has to push those things as well. So you can't just separate the science and art separately.
Very good. I can see your passion in the talent/education level, and we have an expert here in university. I'll get back to you in a couple of minutes after I talk to Cyrus, my friend. You advise the Minister of AI in the UAE, and by the way, the United Arab Emirates was the first country in the world to have a ministerial department, meaning a government entity that is in charge of AI. And we are honored and we have the pleasure to have someone from that ministry. So please tell us about your view and your take on that.
Thanks for this, Sid. So a bit to build on what the Prime Minister has been talking earlier on. When we started looking at building an AI strategy, we looked at where are the strengths of the country. And that's the same for France, with the Rapport Villani, and that's pretty much the same thing that you have done here in Mauritius. And our strength is really about oil and gas, so we're really looking at AI to improve that. So it's really AI to improve government services. Tourism, obviously, but beyond tourism, we're a transportation hub. Land, sea, and air. We have Dubai port, and we have, 38 ports all over the world. So it's a massive transportation hub from all aspects. We also have very strong positioning and desire to have most of the vehicles being autonomous, within the next few years in Dubai, and we're pushing that, building on other technologies that can help with that, including blockchain that we're going to talk about. Other sectors, healthcare, to solve the issues that we have in country, especially cardiovascular disease and diabetes, and cybersecurity, something that touches upon everyone. So that's one aspect inside the country. Outside the country, the UAE is positioning itself into the governance of AI discussion. So we're doing that with IEEE, we're doing that with UNESCO, with OECD, and so we're convening a platform to build on this dialogue, international dialogue.
Very good, thank you so much. Of course, in addition to UAE being a leader in this AI, we also have France. And France actually is trying to be the leader in Europe, but also in the world. And I believe that France was probably among the first countries to have a national strategy for AI. You take the US, for instance, a country that I am familiar with, we still do not have a national strategy for artificial intelligence. China does have a national strategy for artificial intelligence. Canada does have one. Mauritius, I think it's in the working. The fact that we are here, we're talking about that pipeline of strategies. Hopefully, by the next year, if we're coming back here, we will have a national document that would be the roadmap. So Damien, based on your experience from France, what are the most important components, what are the building blocks, if you will, of the French strategy, national strategy on AI?
Well, so in France, indeed, we have a national strategy created by Cédric Villani, mathematicians and deputy. After this strategy, the French President Emmanuel Macron said in last March that we invest 1.5 billion euros in this AI strategy to make France one of the reference and the leader in AI in the world, facing, of course, China and US, who are the two main giants in artificial intelligence. So, a good national strategy is based on the attractiveness of the territories and of the country. So it means that France and also Europe has to attract the best scientists and researchers, has to attract the best students, and attract the best startups to develop the French ecosystem and the European ecosystem of AI. And which is very interesting is that in France, we have strong assets for AI. I mean, we have lots of research labs and public research labs and mathematicians. So it's a strong asset to build AI. And what we have observed is that during the last 3 years, we have more and more startups raising more than $20 million, okay? And it means that we have lots of startups who will become leaders in Europe and internationally. So this is very interesting. And to conclude on this example, I think that we need a bridge between the ecosystems and between the actors of the ecosystem and the governments. It means, for instance, that in France, I'm representing France's AI. We are the largest AI actors organizations in Europe. We have 300 startups, 100 research labs, public and private, French and international. We have 50,000 data scientists in communities, lots of large companies, French and international, and also VCs. And all these actors of the ecosystem, they need the support of the government. And that's why it's very important to have a national strategy that supports strongly the actors of these ecosystems.
Very good, thanks, Damien. Actually, I picked up on your discussion the bridges, the notion of bridges, and you cannot have a coherent, well-integrated national strategy if you're missing on those bridges. One of the most important bridges that we need to think about is, of course, the bridge between the private sector or the economy and education, the economy and higher ed. And Gopal, I'm going actually to ask you this question. You are professor of AI, you are leading research in the UK, and you are aware of the breakthrough technology. What are the things that you have to, if I were the Prime Minister of Mauritius and asked you, what would you advise me to do in terms of connecting, if you will, these educational institutions with the private sector or with the economy in general?
Thanks. Is that working? Thanks, Sid. First, I'd like to thank the Ministry for inviting me over. I'm actually from Mauritius and educated in the UK and a professor of AI, and I'd like to come back here to contribute to government policy. And for me, where I stand at Southampton, where I run the Center for Machine Intelligence, I often talk to local and central government, so with the Office for AI and the Department for Business and Energy and Industrial Strategy. And we see the same messages coming back again and again. And they center around three core principles. Artificial intelligence builds on human intelligence. You need people to build it. Smart artificial intelligence builds on good data. And the third thing is good AI improves quality of life and solves real-world problems. If you build these three principles within your strategic vision, you're guaranteed to achieve something that's meaningful both economically and on a societal level. Now, I also work with AXA Research on a topic called responsible AI, and it has to do with all these three themes. So training people to build the right AI, but really thinking hard about how to build AI or how to incentivize companies to build AI and use AI responsibly. So making use of data in a responsible way and building applications that impact on our lives in a positive way. To build AI that is designed to act responsibly, that respects the ethics, the ethical constraints we have within our society, and in Mauritius in particular, where we have a multicultural society, where we have very specific needs when it comes to the economy, and when we have specific resources that we can tap into, particularly the intellectual capital we have and the blue economy that we have. It's important to understand, to try and build AI that will use and apply to these sectors in a responsible way. And I think for us, in many countries, we will start from the very, very fundamental basics, which is to design curriculum at university, to design and train the right people that are aware of key research questions, but also aware of the industry needs that are current. And then to design frameworks to monitor what companies are doing, to understand what are the standards we should set for the development of responsible AI. I think that's where we should be going.
Very good. You just actually get yourself into trouble, because my next question is to ask you about the legal and the ethical challenges that we need to think about as policymakers to be able to create an environment for, and safe environment for AI. But before I get to this question, let me actually get an announcement for the audience. This is the only way or the only time where you get a chance to ask questions. And we do not want to monopolize the conversation. So please, if you have any questions, I think there are a couple of mics around. Just raise your hand, introduce yourself, tell us about the company or the government entity you work for, and ask your questions. You've got your chance to talk here to experts. Now, let me conclude this first question by saying thank you to Mauritius government, and to compliment also the Mauritius government for being the #1 country in Africa on the Doing Business Index. The Doing Business Index is an index that is produced by World Bank, and what it does, it classifies countries in terms of attractiveness, and we've been talking about cleaning up the environment so investors and foreign direct investors and companies can come to your country. And I believe the Mauritius government has done a very good job in putting Mauritius at the #1 position in African countries, and I believe you are in top 20 countries on this index, the Doing Business Index. I believe also you are the #1 country on the Human Development Index, which goes back to the question of talent and the question of universities. So that's already a very big step that Mauritius has made in terms of creating that environment or that ecosystem for AI. Now, let me go back to the idea of challenges. Of course, any digital transformation, any breakthrough, any technology, any new generation of technology is going to come with some problems and some challenges. And as policymakers, we cannot simply stay without making any proposition. Let me just give you one example. It seems to me from my own research that the average citizen in every country will hear more about artificial intelligence next time through a cyber attack rather than through the good things that artificial intelligence will do. Which means that if we're building an artificial intelligence environment, we need also to have the legal framework, the ethical framework that needs to be there. So in your views, what are some of the challenges that we needed to address ahead of this roadmap? And I think I'm going to start with you, Cyrus, because you are working on some of these challenges.
I think the main challenge here, I mean, AI is such a pervasive technology, but not only internationally, really. I think the main challenge is to have a set of agreements, when you talk about the ethics of AI, to have a set of agreements around values. And the values that we have, you know, in Mauritius, in France, India, or in China, or in the US, all have different levels of acceptance. But to find a common framework baseline where we could all work on is something necessary. And I think most governments understand that. Some governments act upon it stronger than, and faster than other governments. Again, going back to the UAE, this is a dialogue that we're very much embracing and that my minister is pushing forward. I'm hopeful that we can get there, we can get into agreement. We're building on the work of, mentioning IEEE there. They have an initiative called, if you don't know about it, I urge you to look into it. It's called Ethically Aligned Design AI and Autonomous Systems. And IEEE has given standards such as really important standards for the world, and they have been conducting reflections on ethics around that. This is a base, but this is also a dialogue that UNESCO is embracing around the ethics, but so country level and supranational level. That's what's happening.
Very good, thank you so much. Hans, what's your take on this notion of challenges? Cyrus said very interesting thing that AI is a very pervasive in technology, meaning it's everywhere. And it will be implemented everywhere. So it doesn't, it hits basically all sectors and all facets of the economy. What's your experience in building the Silicon Oasis, in building the DTech Center and bringing all the startups? What was your experience, some of the challenges?
Well, I would say, just to touch on the ethical part, because there are a lot of young guys that are fiddling around with algorithms, and sometimes it's questionable if they're used in an ethical way. But I do feel that I have a general sense that the entrepreneurs today are ethically aware, most of them, not all of them, and that they will use these algorithms in a very ethical way. There is no regulation as far as I know, and that's a little bit of a problem. Because it is a technology, and this technology, like any other technology, can be used for good and for bad. But the problem that I see is that artificial intelligence is a typical suitcase term. It is many things. It's like the word love. It's a suitcase term, and so it's very difficult to try to police or regulate. And there are so many different kinds of algorithms. When is an algorithm bad? When is it good? If we hope there's nobody from Facebook here today, but I don't want to stigmatize Facebook, but Facebook has actually been clamped down on a couple of times where they used algorithm in a very unethical way, in a very biased way, almost racist way. And we need to make sure as governments that that doesn't happen. But otherwise, I'm not, let's say, a total libertarian, but you do need to leave space for innovation. And we do need to experiment the next couple of decades with artificial intelligence before we start regulating exactly the same way as with blockchain. Let's just experiment a couple of decades more, and then we can maybe nail it down. It's easier if you look at the data side. Data you can regulate. It is regulated, and so I think that's probably the part of the solution on looking at the data and not so much on the algorithms.
Very good. Dr. Satyam, you use a lot of data and you exploit a lot of that elements. What's your experience in terms of dealing with the challenges of using data analytics or actually connecting data, if you will, with the public?
Okay, so I think connecting data, I feel from a technology point, is the easiest thing to do now compared to 5 years back. But the important thing is coming to the algorithms and also coming to the ethical aspect of it. I think this regulation towards how the algorithms have to be deployed in what context, right? For example, since you mentioned social media, Facebook, having lived that life for a long time, there is a lot more ethical aspect that have to be built into it. And this is a known story. If you look at the history of either data breaches or generating algorithms for very specific reasons which are not ethical, this has been the history in the last 30 years because we have not been able to write the right regulations. And as we actually connect the data sets, these algorithms will become more powerful. As a result, we have to act on writing the right regulations now. Right, we hear all the news about fake news and all. Or I don't know about Mauritius, but in India, there are people who are creating these merging of videos, which can be really dangerous from a social concept. Right, so there are no regulations to it. And you may call it freedom of speech, but I think that comes with a responsibility as well. So I think algorithms, both who are generating it and those who are regulating, those algorithms have to come to some agreement.
Very good, thank you so much. Damien, I want to ask you this question because, again, as we said, France has a very coherent national strategy, and I think very clear on that. What personally interests me is that it has been made by someone who's expert in math, but at the same time, he is also a lawmaker, meaning he's part of the parliament, of the French parliament. Have you had any idea about whether there was some regulations or some sort of framework, ethical framework, moral framework that has been in conversation with respect to this national strategy?
Yeah, well, strategy, you have to open the data, okay? Public data, transportation, and so on, encourage the private sectors to open the data to all the actors in order to create a strong AI ecosystem. So one, open the data. And then two, it's invest in education. Because if you want to attract incredible international research labs, if you want to attract startups, you have to invest here in education on AI. I mean, create bachelor degrees in AI, master degrees in AI, and so on, to attract students, and then to make the country attractive for the research labs, for the startups, and so on. So number two, it is invest in education and specific education and AI. And number three is to indeed create a framework attractive for international investors and international startups to attract them here. And so maybe it's creating a VC fund focused on AI, supported by the government, something like that. So number three is to create the framework. And to conclude on that, I think the most important thing is, but I will speak about that later, but the most important thing is to put in the limelight AI for good. I mean, you have to think of AI with ethics and to have trust in AI. Because for people, you know, in all the countries, they have to understand what is AI, what AI is about, what will be the impact of AI in the daily life of people, you know. And when you create a national strategy, AI for good has to be the good angle. All that I said has to be understood in the prism of AI for good.
Very good. Let me give the audience an example of what we are talking about in terms of challenges. A couple of years ago, there was a bank in the US that used an AI application, different algorithm, to decide basically about loans, who should get a loan and who shouldn't. And banks do that all the time. So basically, you are deciding about the age, about the income, about the region, about the city, about the zip code. You've got a lot of variables that you are using to be able to decide whether this person is actually a good person, that I can give them a loan and they will be able to return the money, yes or no. So basically, that's the type of applications we are thinking about. And one of the problems this bank had a few years ago is that this algorithm magically start to discriminate against certain population. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about this type of problems, that sometimes you build an AI application that start to adversely impacting a certain segment of the population or certain segments of the region. And here, when you ask the manager, when you ask the CEO, can you tell me what's going on with your application? Can you tell me what's going on with your AI? Usually what the person does, they tell, I don't know. I have no clue. And that's the problem of what we call, technical people call, the explainability. Meaning being able to explain your algorithm, being able to explain what your AI application is doing, and being able to explain that black box. So basically, I want to get back to you. You are basically the technician on that and the expert on that. How can we create a framework that helps those people who enter data, those people who train algorithm on how to do things, to avoid specifically that problem? So I am able as a policymaker to explain to society the reason we made this decision. It's not the algorithm, but it's us, meaning the human behind the algorithm.
Right. Let me try to explain that with a couple of examples. The first example is from a recent paper written by ex-colleagues from MIT. They looked at a problem called the trolley problem. Some of you may have heard of this. It involves a car with a number of passengers driving down the road, and at some point some pedestrians walk across the road, and the driver, and in this case an autonomous driver, so an algorithm would have to decide whether to kill the pedestrians because it's too late to save them, to avoid them. And if it wants to avoid them, it would kill the passengers. So it would hit a barrier and kill the passengers. What should it do? So the MIT team decided to run an experiment on the web to see how people would react to this moral dilemma. So it was called the moral machine experiment. You can go and Google it or read the Nature paper. And what they found was that different countries, people from different age groups, from different communities, different cultural backgrounds, would decide differently on what's a fair outcome. Whether killing the baby on the road is better than killing the passenger in the car, whether killing the terrorist in the car is better than killing the old person crossing the road. These difficult moral dilemmas arise in many, many autonomous systems. And it's worrying. I mean, I partially disagree with Hans when he says that engineers are trained to understand the ethical implications of AI, because there was recently a backlash with a statement that one of the researchers at USC, University of Southern California, made when he got up, was talking about using AI to detect within social networks individuals who would be best at looking after the youth. And one question came from some person in the audience asking him, so what do you think about the ethical implications of your work? And he just got up and said, I'm an engineer, I don't worry about the ethics. And that's a problem.
A big problem.
A big problem. And the guy who asked the question was from the New York Times or some other major publication. So it was an issue, and it was raised lots of issues. But so that's one of the challenges I just, if I quickly have time to talk about, is my own research, where we're looking at humans controlling multiple drones, where one pilot would control maybe a swarm of 100 drones. In those circumstances, who do you give responsibility to? Who do you give control to? Do you give it to the human who's controlling, who has a limited reaction time, or do you give it to an algorithm that can decide very quickly whether to crash the drone or hit a car? You know, these are the kind of control problems that arise. And I go back to what Satyam said earlier, which is in his talk, which was to track the provenance of data, provenance of decisions. This is one of the key elements of a meaningful approach or properly regulated approach to AI, in to understand where the data is coming from, where the decision is being made, whether it's a human or a machine, and what are the products of these decisions, in order for us to be able to make those systems accountable.
Very good. Thank you so much for the example of the moral dilemma, because that's a very, very good example. I'm going to give chance to the audience if we have a couple of questions. Yes, I can see a hand over there. So go ahead, tell us who you are and tell us about your question very briefly, please.
Hello?
I am Chris Ganou from Collège du Saint-Esprit. I'm an educator. Now, actually, I'm a computer science teacher. I was very fascinated about robotics, artificial intelligence, and all these things about Society 4.0. So I started buying some kits, and I started programming them using sensors, actuators, and so on. Then I found it very interesting. I tried to get my students on board, sharing it with them. And I found that my students were very interested in this. Very interested. But unfortunately, it was not in the curriculum. I had to do a robotic club, right? I think the first robotic club in the country, in my college. And where my students participated in making lots of projects. They were very good at coding. And they even won Google prizes, right? And went at the headquarters there. So my question is that when I listen to you, You're talking about many startups, about universities, but I feel that's not enough. When we talk about Society 4.0, which is very near, which has already begun, the future is now, right? But many people would like to know about artificial intelligence, about robotics, about Internet of Things. Some of them are very few knowledge about it. What about the general population? What about building up a workforce, right? But how to do that? If you want something like this to happen, right? Now, what about the people who have already gone for universities, but not in AI? Can we reach them?
Very good. Question well asked, and that actually leads me to our third topic, which I am going to run it through the panelists. But I'm going to give Dr. Satyam first the chance to answer. Go ahead.
So if you look at US and even in India right now, there are multiple programs for the high school level students. In fact, in US, there is a program called FIRST, F-I-R-S-T. It was started by a person named Dean Kamen, I think that's the right name. And it actually trains people to build the concepts of AI, mechanical engineering, robotics, all together. But more importantly, it's about the teamwork. In fact, the winning prize, or the chairman's prize they call it, is given to the team that supports their opponent during the competition. Right? So because in the real world, when you're taking these massive robots, how do you make them successful, right? So you work together with the team. But on the other hand, there is another program called Maker Faire, which is like 3D printing and all the emerging technologies coming together in a societal way of educating rather than just a formal training, correct? And then, of course, the universities are there. But I think these programs are now starting at 5th and 6th grade. And now, recently, there are some 2 companies which have started making these robotic kits with Raspberry Pis at the primary school level. So I think now, if we look at it, I think in the last 5 years, I think there is a big adoption of these things. And I think the government has played a big role, especially, I can talk about the state of Virginia and some other states. They've actually invested in it, providing this public-private partnership, combining with education. I think this is, and that's the same thing happening in India, especially in few major cities. I think that it's a completely doable to build the talent.
Very good, Satyam. Let me actually give you a different answer that I'm going to ask the experts here to talk. I think we are again at the beginning of this digital transformation. I'll give you the example of UAE, Dubai. In Dubai, normal citizens already interact a lot with artificial intelligence. I advise Dubai police, and we already have actually an app that is built around the concept of artificial intelligence that helps a lots of things that you can do as a citizen. We've got the city that is mapped out, and it is actually trying to help police officers to predict the crime before it happens. That's actually the hope for artificial intelligence. I also know that Hans is going to be speaking today about how artificial intelligence is being actually deployed and rolled out at the citizen level. And that leads me again to my final theme for the topic. How can we enhance citizen experience through artificial intelligence? What are some of the applications that you can see, for instance, that would be applicable to the context of Mauritius, to the context of this island? Cyrus, you want to take a shot on that based on your experience?
Well, I'd like to answer that question going back to the gentleman's question also, because I think the best way to have this transformation is to prepare for the upcoming generation, and we really need to rethink of the way the education system are being taught and the subject that are being taught there, by including AI, robotics, blockchain, all these emerging techs there, and including how to get prepared for future, what type of future skills need to be taught right now to get on board. So to answer your question, I think it's from a government angle, not merely from an application angle, but from government angle, it's really a dialogue between education sector and ICT, and see the impact and transformation on ICT and trying to think about it. So obviously it's not only one government. We're talking to, for instance, in the UAE, we're talking with the Economist Intelligence Unit or others working on that, but trying to think ahead how to get prepared for that.
Yeah, very good. I think traffic management, for instance, for big cities like Los Angeles or Dubai or cities in India, again, predicting crime, as I said earlier. Hans, what was your experience around the startups that are working? I think you will be talking about this in the afternoon. Can you tell us a little bit what would be some of the applications that will benefit, again, the citizen?
Yeah. So to go a little bit back to your, I feel you have a sense of, you have a sense of urgency. Can we do more? But just remember, just a few months ago, it was all blockchain, blockchain, blockchain. Now it's AI, AI, AI. And there are actually 10 different revolutionary technologies out there. And it's a little difficult to look at all of them. But I also advise universities on their curriculum, what they should be teaching going forward. And especially also how will society change when AI is coming. Should you become a pilot? Maybe not. You know, maybe that's not something you should. We don't need that many pilots in the future. So, but there's a lot of different things that we are doing. But as I mentioned before, to what's called introduce AI, but it's still a very nascent thing. I mean, it has permeated very silently society, just normal artificial narrow intelligence. But there's a lot more that's coming, and we need millions of people moving into this. And universities are aware of this, but I think there's so many other ways we can also do it. The online universities are booming everywhere. I think there's 400 online universities now over the world. There's this course that I just took a course. It's called Get Smarter. That was with MIT, David Schreier. No, not David Schreier. That was a blockchain one. But with MIT. A short course, 6 weeks. You don't need to take a master's in AI, but it gives you a nice foundation to work on. And this is what we try to do and to foster, and then foster the innovation and entrepreneurship. But as I said, just 2 years ago we had 5 blockchain companies in our center. Now we have 138. Wow. I think the same thing will happen to AI. I think we have 10 today, and it will probably be 100 in 24 months.
Very good, very good. Thank you so much, Hans. Damien, very quickly, we don't have enough time, just a couple of seconds. What's the French experience in terms of enhancing the citizen experience? What is being done in France now to enhance the citizen experience from a digital transformation point of view?
Before you start answering that question, we have a question here from the audience.
Sorry, where are we?
We have a question here from the audience.
Okay, go ahead.
They wanna interfere and ask a question.
Okay, same rule applies. Only a couple of seconds.
Yes, and also we have to wrap up this panel discussion as soon as possible.
That's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Thank you. My name is Jayan Chalam from the Consumer Association of Mauritius. 2 questions. One is maybe for all the audience, is the question that has always arisen, taken up by Stephen Hawking or others, the issue of singularity. That's one thing. And the other thing is AI, when we talk about it right now, it's we looking at it bits and pieces of looking, it's a very promising technology, maybe the most promising technology, but also maybe the most dangerous. Maybe the most dangerous. Now, since the way we approach it could be government-wise, centrally planned government, maybe have a better sort of grip on what is happening in their country, maybe. Now, you have the other sector, which are the private sector, and you have Facebook, you have Google, maybe one individual who can decide, all right, what is the sort of approach we're taking, which is not necessarily ethical. Now, how do we sort of approach these 2 things, the first and the second? Thank you.
Very good, thank you so much. I'm going to ask Gopal to address these questions, but also I want you to address the impact of AI in Mauritius, because you're from here, obviously, so you know more than me. So tell us a little bit, how do you see AI being implemented here? Go ahead.
So, very quickly, the quick answer to the training needs, maths and coding from a very young age is fundamental to turning Mauritius into an AI powerhouse. Multidisciplinary research at the university level. That's my sort of quick answer to that question. To a quick answer to the other question about singularity, we're very, very far from the AI, what we call strong AI, which is human level intelligence or superhuman level intelligence, is really, really far ahead. I think 50 years ahead. Now, coming back, and we can have a chat offline about this. Coming back to the key points of what are interesting applications that are useful to society and useful in particular to Mauritius. There are 4 areas I've identified in Mauritius. One is energy, healthcare, water management, and the 4th one is disaster response. And just to give you an example of 2 examples in the healthcare domain and in the energy domain. So one project that I'm running with the company I work with, so North Star Solar, which I work with as chief scientist, we deployed smart home kits. These are designed for sort of to look after your elderly family, so elderly parents. So we give you an app, and the app will tell you when your family member, your dad, has fallen in the kitchen, fallen in the bathroom. Will tell you if they've over-medicated or under-medicated, they've taken the pills at the right time, etc., etc. And the whole idea is to build up a good enough data set for us to identify activities in the home and therefore empower the families. And one key benefit we see out of this is that people are able to go back to work. Apparently, 25% of high school kids look after an elderly parent in the UK. Can we get these kids to go to school instead of staying back at home looking after grandma when she's ill? So this is the kind of really hardcore application that can have an impact on society. A second one I'll very quickly mention is a smart energy system idea. So the idea of deploying distributed energy generation across the country. So you put solar panels on roofs, ground-mounted solar, and the idea now is to try and ingest the energy when it's being produced by the sun. And in Mauritius, we have lots of sunshine. And therefore, can we ingest this by storing the energy in batteries and giving it back to people at the right time? And we've built algorithms that can help us optimize the system, help us flatten the loads on the grid, and therefore reduce the energy costs to the government, to the country, but at the same time giving more autonomy to individual homes. And you can only do that if you have really good AI built into these systems.
Very good. That's what I call AI with a purpose. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here. Thank you so much for the audience, and we shall see you later.
Thank you very much, panelists.